In every nation, there comes a time when silence can no longer protect the guilty, when truth, long buried beneath fear and power, begins to rise again. From shattered courts and censored headlines to the quiet grief of families still waiting for answers, the echoes of truth have never stopped calling. This is not just the story of one country. It is the story of a world learning that justice is not vengeance. It is restoration, a lesson born from the belief that courage should be rewarded, and truth, no matter how late, should find its light. The merit of truth, a framework where honesty becomes strength, confession becomes healing, and the human conscience becomes the bridge between darkness and redemption. This is the awakening of that conscience. Echoes of truth, a nation's search for justice. The merit of truth, rewarding courage, restoring conscience. Prologue, the silence before the storm. There are moments in human history when truth hides behind walls too high to climb, when justice whispers, but no one dares to listen. The world has seen it, time and time again. Corruption taking root not in the darkness alone, but in the hearts of those trusted to protect the light. Across continents, the same story echoes in different tongues. Files lost, voices silenced, evidence destroyed not by accident, but by fear. The fear of exposure, the fear of consequence, the fear of truth itself. For decades, nations have battled this silent enemy, not one of weapons or armies, but one of concealment and compromise. Where power and profit entwine, and the line between justice and crime grows painfully thin. Yet even in the shadows, humanity's conscience endures. There are always a few, brave enough to speak, wise enough to see, and strong enough to risk everything for something greater. Not all are saints. Some were part of the very systems they helped to dismantle. But when the truth becomes too heavy to bear, confession can become the most powerful act of resistance. And so a new idea began to rise, quietly at first, born not from perfection, but from desperation. A system built not only on punishment, but on redemption, where information itself could heal a broken chain of justice, where honesty, even late, could lead to forgiveness. This is the story of that idea, how nations, scarred by deception, found courage to face their past, how truth became a currency more valuable than gold, and how in the end, human conscience, once awakened, can reshape the destiny of an entire world. Chapter 1: Whispers Beneath the Surface. It begins quietly, always quietly. In the corridors of old power, behind closed doors and confident smiles, the first cracks appear. History tells us that every great deception starts small. A favor here, a secret there. Documents misplaced, cases temporarily delayed. Soon, small lies evolve into pillars of silence, holding up entire empires of corruption. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, governments around the globe faced this hidden decay. From the opulent halls of corporate giants to the dust-choked offices of forgotten ministries, truth was suffocating. Whistleblowers feared retribution, and investigators were too often outnumbered, not by criminals, but by silence itself. But silence cannot hold forever. Somewhere, an honest voice always begins to rise. In South Africa, during the years after apartheid, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission dared to face the unthinkable, offering amnesty to those who confessed their crimes truthfully, placing revelation above revenge. It was not perfect, but it was powerful. It showed the world that even those who once walked in the dark could help guide others toward the light. Similar ideas emerged elsewhere, in Colombia, where former paramilitary members traded confessions for reduced sentences. In Italy, where pentiti, repentant mafiosi, shattered the Cosa Nostra's walls of silence. And in the United States, where federal prosecutors used witness cooperation to dismantle cartels and corrupt networks from within. Each of these systems shared one unspoken truth. Sometimes the only way to expose the entire web is to let one spider speak. And in that fragile exchange between guilt and grace, a new model for justice began to take shape. A system not of mercy for the wicked, but of redemption for the honest. Not a loophole, but a bridge between what was broken and what could be rebuilt. Chapter 2. The Currency of Truth. In every civilization, there comes a time when the old tools of justice begin to rust, when the weight of bureaucracy and the fear of consequence choke progress, and even good men turn away from what they know is right. But history shows us one constant truth. Information, honest, complete, and courageous, can change everything. In the early 2000s, a quiet revolution in justice began to take form. Across continents, investigators, policymakers, and social reformers started to ask a dangerous question. What if the truth itself became a form of currency? Not money, not power, but truth, measured, verified, and rewarded based on the value it brought to uncovering something greater. It was a radical thought, one that challenged the very foundation of punishment and redemption. Because what if those who had once committed crimes themselves held the keys to unraveling crimes far larger? What if the guilty could help dismantle the system that once protected them? In Italy, this principle was already being tested in the battle against the mafia. The pentiti, or those who repented, began to speak. Their testimonies led to hundreds of arrests, decades of hidden crimes laid bare before the law. Many of these men were no heroes. They had blood on their hands. But through truth, verified truth, they helped break cycles that had seemed immortal. In Colombia, after years of internal conflict, a similar model was born through the Justice and Peace Law. Former paramilitary leaders were encouraged to confess in full detail, names, networks, disappearances, in exchange for reduced sentences and reintegration support. For victims, it was painful. For society, it was revolutionary. Because for the first time, the truth was not just evidence, it was the foundation of healing. And in the United States, federal prosecutors began formalizing cooperation credit systems. Criminals who offered substantial assistance to dismantle criminal enterprises could receive reduced penalties. It was cold, calculated, but effective. Built not on morality, but on measurable impact. Every detail, every document, every confession was assigned weight. A merit score within the architecture of justice. Slowly, a new philosophy began to form. Justice could evolve beyond vengeance. It could become a living system of accountability where truth was both a weapon and a remedy. At its core was a belief that every revelation carried value, and that value could be quantified, verified, and used to rebuild trust between people and the institutions that served them. This idea, the currency of truth, did not erase guilt. It redefined responsibility. It said to the world, you cannot undo what you have done, but you can still serve humanity by unveiling what others cannot. And in a time when corruption grew smarter, faster, and more invisible, such cooperation became not just a choice, but a necessity. Chapter 3. Blueprints of Redemption. As the idea of truth as currency spread, nations began to see its potential not just in words but in systems. No longer could justice rely solely on chance, courage, or the honor of individuals. It needed structure, integrity, and transparency. From the shadows of old corruption, pioneers emerged. Analysts, investigators, and visionaries who dared to ask, what if we could build a system that made the act of revealing truth measurable, safe, and transformative? In Europe, small pilot programs were tested. Confessions were time-stamped, verified through cross-reference records, and stored securely so that no powerful individual could erase or manipulate the evidence. Each verified revelation carried a weight, a merit score, calculated by its contribution to solving cases or exposing networks. It was justice, quantified. In Asia, reformers explored similar frameworks, using technology to validate the honesty of witnesses. Blockchain-inspired ledgers ensured transparency, making it impossible to alter or delete statements. A single confession could ripple through decades of unsolved cases, leading to arrests, prosecutions, and sometimes even the exposure of long-hidden political corruption. Yet this system was not cold or mechanical. It relied on human courage. Every participant faced a choice: to remain silent, to protect oneself at the cost of society, or to speak, to risk everything, and to contribute to a greater truth. And as the first real successes emerged, hope began to spread. Victims once silenced could finally find closure. Communities learned that even those who had erred could become agents of justice. The system proved one undeniable truth. Redemption is not a gift, it is a responsibility. Across the Atlantic, inspired by these experiments, governmental and non-governmental bodies in the Americas began formalizing cooperation programs. Here, the framework was simple but revolutionary. Cooperation in uncovering corruption or criminal networks earned tangible credits. Credits that could reduce punishment. Credits that validated one's courage to reveal the hidden truth. And yet, the most remarkable change was not legal, it was moral. People began to see that the power of confession could outweigh the power of concealment. The act of telling the truth became a lever for justice, a bridge to redemption, and a beacon of hope for societies long burdened by silence and fear. In this new blueprint, the message was clear. Justice does not require perfection, it requires integrity. It does not demand saints, it demands courage. And when courage is rewarded, even imperfect humans can rebuild a broken system. Chapter 4. The First Trials. Every system begins in theory, but its truth is proven only in practice. The merit of truth system, designed to reward courage and uncover hidden corruption, faced its first real tests in the field. Investigators approached complex cases, decades-old corruption, organized crime, and networks that had remained invisible for generations. Files were missing, evidence compromised, and witnesses hesitant. Yet the system offered a new promise. If participants told the truth, full, verifiable, and honest, they could earn credit not only for their cooperation, but also for helping society reclaim what was lost. In Europe, prosecutors working against entrenched financial crimes implemented pilot programs. A single confession about falsified contracts or bribery could unravel entire decades-old schemes. Each new piece of information was meticulously verified and added to the merit ledger, forming a chain reaction that illuminated what had long been hidden. In Colombia, the Justice and Peace framework allowed former combatants to recount crimes in exchange for reintegration opportunities. The first trials were tense. Victims attended hearings with hearts heavy from decades of loss. Former perpetrators revealed networks of influence, money laundering, and disappearances that had been invisible for years. The system worked, slowly, painfully, but inevitably. Even in the United States, high-profile prosecutions against organized crime tested cooperation-based approaches. Criminals who spoke truthfully helped dismantle drug rings and fraudulent enterprises. Every testimony added value to the system. The merit-based approach ensured that participants' contributions were recognized objectively, not arbitrarily, allowing investigators to prioritize the most critical leads first. The first trials also revealed weaknesses. Not all participants were truthful. Some attempted to manipulate the system for personal gain. Yet each deception strengthened the framework, proving that transparency, verification, and oversight were essential. By learning from these early mistakes, the system evolved, becoming more resilient, fair, and effective. Across the globe, a pattern emerged. Truth, when properly encouraged, measured, and rewarded, could achieve what decades of punishment alone could not. Silent conspiracies, once impenetrable, became visible. Justice, long delayed, found new pathways. And perhaps most importantly, the first trials reminded humanity of an enduring principle. Even the most broken systems can be healed if courage, honesty, and accountability are recognized, valued, and acted upon. Chapter 5. Bridges of Light. Once the first trials proved the system's potential, the idea began to transcend borders. It was no longer just a national experiment. Truth as currency, courage as merit, and confession as a tool for redemption began to inspire reformers across the globe. From Europe to the Americas, Asia to Africa, governments and organizations saw a new possibility, a system where cooperation, honesty, and accountability could build bridges across broken institutions. In Southeast Asia, investigators used pilot programs to tackle long-forgotten corruption cases. By incentivizing detailed disclosures, they unearthed networks of illicit influence, uncovering practices that had persisted for decades. The evidence, once considered lost, now illuminated the path forward. Every confession became a bridge, connecting fragments of truth scattered across time. In Africa, countries emerging from civil strife explored similar models. Truth commissions encouraged former combatants and bureaucrats alike to disclose misdeeds, linking decades of unrest to systemic solutions. The process was neither easy nor painless. But as the bridges of light stretched across continents, they carried something more powerful than evidence: hope. International organizations began to coordinate. Investigative methods, verification protocols, and merit scoring systems were shared. Countries that had struggled to prosecute past crimes now had access to knowledge and frameworks that could reveal the invisible. Cooperation was no longer a gamble. It became a measurable and repeatable path to justice. And yet, the most profound change was cultural. Societies began to understand that silence was no longer safe. The act of speaking truth became a civic duty, and in some places, a moral awakening. Redemption was not just a legal term, it became a shared aspiration, a bridge between the past and the future. By building these bridges, humanity demonstrated that justice is not a solitary pursuit. It requires collaboration, courage, and the recognition that even those who once erred can become agents of change. The bridges were fragile at first, stretching over the chasms of distrust and fear. But with every verified confession, every network exposed, every historical crime illuminated, they grew stronger. A web of light connecting nations, institutions, and citizens in a shared commitment to truth. Across oceans and continents, one message became clear. Justice is not only about punishment, but about illumination, connection, and the courage to rebuild what was broken. Chapter 6: The Turning Point. Every revolution, no matter how carefully planned, faces a moment when theory meets the unforgiving weight of reality. For the merit of truth system, that moment arrived not in a single country, but across the interconnected web of nations adopting it. The system had uncovered decades of hidden corruption, organized crime, and long-forgotten injustices. But with every revelation came resistance. Powerful individuals, once untouchable, sought to undermine the process. Witnesses hesitated, fearing retribution. Old alliances, once secret, were tested in the harsh light of accountability. In Eastern Europe, investigators discovered that decades-old criminal networks had infiltrated both government and business. The first wave of confessions led to arrests, but also to public outrage, political maneuvering, and intense scrutiny of the system itself. Would society embrace a model that rewarded cooperation even for those once complicit? Or would fear and doubt erode the fragile bridge of trust that had begun to form? Across Latin America, the stakes were no less dramatic. Former paramilitary leaders, once feared, now spoke openly about networks of violence and corruption. Every disclosed truth exposed deeper layers of complicity, some reaching into institutions that were supposed to uphold justice. The system worked, but the human consequences were raw and complicated. Victims demanded accountability. Communities grappled with moral ambiguity. And yet, the merit-based approach allowed society to distinguish courage from deceit, contribution from evasion. The turning point was not just legal, it was moral and cultural. Nations learned that embracing truth requires both courage and patience. Even imperfect confessions, when verified and contextualized, became building blocks for systemic reform. The system revealed that accountability is not linear. It is a process of connection, reflection, and the willingness to confront the past, no matter how painful. By the end of the first global implementation phase, one undeniable reality emerged. The act of revealing truth could transform both the guilty and the innocent, redeeming not just legal cases, but entire societies weighed down by silence and fear. This was the turning point, the moment when humanity began to understand that justice, courage, and redemption were intertwined. Not as abstract ideals, but as measurable, actionable forces capable of rebuilding the very foundations of society. Chapter 7: Seeds of Unity. The merit of truth system had survived its turning point. It had weathered resistance, fear, and uncertainty. And now, like a sapling breaking through hard soil, it began to grow. Not just within nations, but across borders. For the first time, reformers realized that truth could create connections between countries long divided by history, politics, or suspicion. Investigators began sharing verified methods, cross-referencing confessions, and coordinating strategies. A confession in one country could unravel crimes stretching across oceans, illuminating networks that were once thought untouchable. In Africa, nations emerging from decades of civil unrest used the system to document past atrocities. Collaborative commissions allowed multiple countries to link hidden networks of corruption, trade, and organized crime. The results were profound. Justice was no longer confined to a single courtroom or a single nation. It had become a global endeavor. In Asia, investigative agencies began implementing merit-based truth programs for political and corporate corruption. Whistleblowers, once ignored or threatened, now had a structured path to report wrongdoing safely, knowing their contributions were recognized and protected. As the seeds of unity took root, transparency became contagious. Even in North America, lessons from other continents informed new federal programs. Interagency cooperation, combined with the merit of truth philosophy, exposed networks that had resisted decades of traditional investigation. Communities began to understand that their vigilance, their voices, and their courage mattered in ways previously unimaginable. But the greatest impact was human. Across continents, participants began to see themselves not as isolated individuals, but as part of a larger movement of conscience. Every verified confession, every connection exposed, every long-forgotten injustice illuminated served as a reminder that unity, built upon the courage to speak and the commitment to truth, can overcome even the most entrenched systems of corruption. The seeds had been planted. Now they needed care, attention, and faith. For the first time, the world glimpsed what could happen when courage, honesty, and collaboration were rewarded instead of punished. A new era of shared responsibility and hope was beginning to bloom. Chapter 8: Echoes Across the World. Once the seeds of unity were planted, their impact began to resonate far beyond initial expectations. The merit of truth system, once a concept tested in isolated nations, now echoed across continents, touching the lives of millions. In Europe, long-forgotten financial scandals were exposed, revealing patterns of bribery, embezzlement, and collusion that had silently shaped industries for decades. Former participants in these networks came forward, their confessions illuminating complex webs of deceit and corruption. Investigators used this information to hold not just individuals, but entire systems accountable. In Latin America, decades-old paramilitary crimes finally saw resolution. Former combatants, encouraged by merit-based truth incentives, disclosed networks of violence and corruption, allowing prosecutors to prosecute major figures who had evaded justice for years. Communities that had lived in fear were able to reconcile with the past, acknowledging both the pain and the courage that made truth possible. In Asia and Africa, governments applied the same principles to political corruption and organized crime. From bribery and embezzlement to human trafficking and illicit trade, verified information became the cornerstone of reform. Even where evidence had once been destroyed or concealed, cooperative testimony illuminated paths toward justice that had seemed impossible. And across the oceans, in North America, the system demonstrated that merit and accountability could coexist. Criminal networks dismantled, corporate malfeasance exposed, and government oversight improved. It was proof that a single, well-designed framework could have transformative impact globally. Yet the echoes were not just legal, they were deeply human. Victims found closure, communities rediscovered trust, and even those who had participated in wrongdoing realized their capacity for change. The merit of truth system was no longer just a framework for investigation. It had become a movement of conscience, spanning nations and cultures, showing that accountability, courage, and redemption are universal values. And in these echoes, one undeniable lesson emerged. When courage is rewarded, when truth is treated as a treasure rather than a threat, even the most entrenched corruption can begin to crumble. Even the most forgotten injustices can be brought into the light, and the world, one confession at a time, becomes a place where hope and integrity can endure. Chapter 9: Reflections and Resistance. No system, no matter how brilliant, can grow without challenge. As the merit of truth framework expanded, it encountered resistance, subtle, overt, and sometimes dangerous. In Europe, entrenched bureaucracies questioned the fairness of rewarding confession. Critics argued that cooperating criminals might escape full accountability. Debates echoed in courtrooms, media, and public discourse. Yet these tensions were vital, forcing the system to refine its measures, tighten verification, and uphold transparency. In Latin America, resistance took on a more personal dimension. Victims and communities struggled with moral ambiguity. How could someone who once caused harm now be a source of justice? The system's architects realized that healing required not just structure, but empathy, guidance, and dialogue. The human heart could not be ignored. In Africa and Asia, political and cultural barriers arose. Old alliances, fear of exposure, and the threat of retaliation created hurdles. Yet these challenges illuminated a truth as old as justice itself. Progress demands courage, not only from the guilty, but also from the communities, leaders, and institutions willing to embrace change. The system itself evolved through reflection. Mistakes were analyzed, oversights corrected, and protections enhanced. Transparency became more than a guideline. It became a principle. Communities learned that accountability is not punishment alone, but an opportunity to acknowledge past wrongs, correct them, and build a stronger foundation for the future. Through this resistance, the merit of truth framework proved its resilience. Opposition, once feared, became a catalyst for refinement. Mistrust became verification. Fear became courage, and uncertainty became a commitment to justice that was both practical and humane. Across continents, a lesson emerged clearly. True reform is never easy. It challenges power, perception, and comfort. But when societies reflect, adapt, and persist, resistance becomes the very force that strengthens the bridges of justice. And so the world began to understand. The path to integrity is never smooth, but every obstacle overcome becomes a beacon for those who will follow. Chapter 10: The Human Cost and Triumph. Every story of reform carries a human heartbeat. The courage of those who choose to speak, the fear of those who linger in silence, and the weight of consequences, both seen and unseen. Across continents, participants faced enormous personal risks. In Europe, whistleblowers exposing decades of corruption endured threats, social isolation, and intense scrutiny. Their families watched with anxiety as lives were upended for the sake of truth. Yet despite fear, they pressed forward, understanding that courage could alter the course of history. In Latin America, former combatants and paramilitary leaders revealed truths that had long haunted nations. For them, cooperation meant facing the full memory of their actions. Confessions that could not be taken back. Stories that bore the scars of loss, betrayal, and moral conflict. The system did not erase guilt, but it gave them a path to redemption, a chance to transform complicity into contribution. In Asia and Africa, similar stories unfolded. Ordinary citizens, investigators, and bureaucrats risked reputations and safety to bring hidden crimes into the light. Some faltered, some resisted, but many discovered an unexpected power in truth, the ability to reconcile the past and influence the future. And yet, triumph was not measured solely in arrests or prosecutions. It was measured in restored trust, healed communities, and the courage that inspired others to act. Victims found closure. Societies discovered pathways out of long shadows of silence. Even those once complicit began to understand that accountability is a form of service, a gift that restores faith in humanity. This duality, the human cost and the triumph, became the heart of the merit of truth system. It reminded the world that reform is never abstract. It is lived, experienced, and felt. Every verified confession carried both pain and hope. Every act of courage became a lesson in resilience. And as these stories spread, the movement grew. Not because of laws alone, not because of technology alone, but because humans, flawed and imperfect, dared to face what they once feared. Through the cost came the triumph. Through courage came restoration. Through the power of truth, the world began to heal. Chapter 11. Legacy of Transformation. Time is the ultimate judge of any reform. Decades may pass, but the impact of courageous choices resonates through generations. The merit of truth system had proven itself, not merely as a tool for investigation, but as a framework capable of reshaping societies. Countries that embraced the system saw corruption dismantled, networks exposed, and institutions strengthened in ways previously thought impossible. In Europe, decades-old corporate and political scandals became lessons for transparency. Future leaders studied these cases, learning that accountability must be woven into the fabric of governance, and that courage must be recognized, even when it comes from unlikely sources. In Latin America, the framework inspired new generations of reformers. Young investigators, lawyers, and civic leaders saw the system as a model for justice that could balance mercy and accountability, empowering communities to break cycles of violence and corruption. In Asia and Africa, merit-based truth programs continued to evolve, adapting to local cultures while maintaining the core principles of courage, verification, and redemption. The legacy was evident. Societies once paralyzed by fear now embrace transparency as a pillar of progress. Even globally, the concept transcended borders. International bodies shared methods, protocols, and lessons learned, creating a network of conscience that connected nations in a shared commitment to integrity. The ultimate legacy, however, was human. Every person who chose to speak, to reveal, to cooperate, left behind a mark far greater than personal credit or reduced consequences. They forged a world where courage was contagious, where truth was honored, and where redemption was possible not just for individuals, but for entire societies. Through this transformation, the world learned a timeless lesson. Justice is not a static law, but a living principle. It grows, evolves, and endures when humanity dares to act with integrity. The merit of truth system became more than policy. It became a movement of conscience, a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, the human spirit can illuminate the path forward. Chapter 11b. The Hidden Ledger, Truths Beneath a Nation's Silence. In every nation, there are stories that refuse to fade, because silence cannot erase truth. Sri Lanka is one such nation, a land of deep faith, ancient wisdom, and remarkable resilience, but also a land where justice often walks a lonely road. Beneath its beauty lies a hidden ledger, a record of questions unanswered and voices unheard. The Easter Sunday bombings of 2019, more than 200 innocent lives lost in a single morning of terror. Years later, the victims' families still wait, not only for justice, but for truth. Who knew, who ignored, and who benefited? Then there was Lasantha Wickrematunge, the journalist who wrote his own obituary, predicting his death at the hands of power. His words live on, but his killers still walk free. Wasim Thajuddin, a national football hero, his death staged as an accident, his truth buried until courage forced it back to light. And still, the list grows. Prageeth Eknalagoda, who vanished for exposing lies. The central bank bond scam and the MiG aircraft deal. Two symbols of how truth bends beneath power. And the mysterious death of Dinesh Shafter, silenced before his questions could be answered. Each name, each case, a page in that hidden ledger. Each silence, a shadow on justice. But history reminds us, truth has never been defeated by silence, only delayed by fear. What if Sri Lanka chose a different path? A path where honesty is not punished but protected, where those who step forward with evidence, testimony, or confession are not branded traitors, but recognized as patriots. Other nations have done it. South Africa built peace by facing its pain. Colombia unearthed graves by rewarding confession. Germany reopened wounds to find healing. They learned that justice is not vengeance, it is clarity. Perhaps Sri Lanka too can begin its renewal not through retribution, but through truth as merit, a system that rewards transparency, safeguards whistleblowers, and honors the courage to speak. Because the price of silence is always greater than the cost of truth. And someday, when the nation finally balances that hidden ledger, when those who know speak, Sri Lanka's conscience will awaken not through anger, but through light, the light of truth. Chapter 12, Epilogue, Echoes of Justice, the Awakening of Conscience. The journey of truth, courage, and accountability has spanned continents, decades, and countless lives. From forgotten crimes to global reforms, from the silent complicity of the past to the illumination of hidden networks, the merit of truth system has shown the world that justice is not merely a process. It is a principle that can transform humanity itself. Across Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa, and North America, the lessons are clear. When courage is recognized, when confessions are verified and valued, when systems reward accountability over silence, societies can heal, restore trust, and break free from cycles of corruption. This framework, while tested globally, holds relevance for any nation striving to confront its own past. Even today, countries grappling with unresolved political corruption, hidden criminal networks, or long-forgotten injustices can learn from this model. Through structured cooperation, merit-based truth systems, and transparent verification, hidden connections can be revealed, perpetrators held accountable, and trust rebuilt. For example, the contemporary political injustice challenges in Sri Lanka, from historical corruption to unresolved criminal practices, to past alliances linking politics, crime, and clandestine violence, illustrate how principles of the merit of truth framework could illuminate the past, guide reform, and awaken collective conscience. It is a reminder that no system is too broken, no corruption too deep, and no silence too long for courage, truth, and structured accountability to restore integrity. The echoes of justice resonate far beyond the courtroom. They touch the hearts of victims, inspire reformers, and awaken societies to their own potential for renewal. The awakening of conscience is the final message, that humanity can transform not only its systems but itself through courage, accountability, and the relentless pursuit of truth. And so the story concludes, not with finality, but with a call to action, to embrace integrity, to speak truth boldly, and to recognize that even in the darkest chapters of history, humanity can light a path toward justice, redemption, and hope. The journey is not over. It continues in every voice that dares to speak, every hand that seeks reform, and every heart that believes in the enduring power of truth. If you found inspiration, insight, or motivation in this journey, please subscribe to the Mind Uplift channel to continue exploring the power of truth, courage, and positive transformation. Join us as we share stories, ideas, and lessons that uplift the mind, strengthen the spirit, and illuminate the path toward a better world. Don't forget to like our videos, share with friends, and leave a comment to share your thoughts and engage with our community.